Welcome to A Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. I am Judge Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Frazier History Museum. You know, Fred, today is a great day. It's a great day because we are celebrating 1 year being on this show. A Matter of Perspective has been on the show been on the air for about a year now, and we've received a lot of feedback from people, and it's been a great time. I think one of the best things that I've received is an opportunity to get a message from someone over in Russia. A lady let me know that she's been watching the show and that she enjoys what we're doing here, and we need to keep it up. So we're going to keep this going for people in the United States, also in Russia, and hopefully in other cities across the country and the world as well. Today we have a special guest, and we are very happy to be here today. We have Miss Sabine Nassim, the director of the Louisville Metro Office for Globalization. Miss Nassim, thank you for being on our show, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You know, we were talking before we got on the show, and we've been doing a lot of similar things. You've been here for about 15 years, and I thought it was just remarkable. Over the 15 years that you've been here, we've never had an opportunity to meet one another. So how'd you get here? I know we've talked about a lot of things leading up to this point. I know a little bit about your background, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I know that you are from California.
Yep.
And there are a lot of things that go into that. So tell me, growing up in California, how were things for you?
Sure. Well, let me even go one step further back and tell you I was born in Pakistan. So I was born in Pakistan. It was a little over a year when we moved to Southern California, and lived in Orange County majority of my life. And it was probably, gosh, I'm going to give away my age here. It's late 70s, early 80s. And I mention that because California at that point was probably in a different space than it is now, culturally, environmentally, in many, many aspects. And it was at a place that wasn't, at least in the city that my family decided to move to, wasn't very accepting of someone who was a different color, a different religion, or a different culture. And we experienced some pretty harsh times. We were probably the only non-Caucasian family living in that subdivision or even on that street. And we had, we'd occasionally wake up to car windows smashed in, or, our house teepeed, or our garage door with spray painted. So we had a lot of that growing up. My mom, she tried to acclimate and tried to integrate, and would end up abandoning her traditional garb so that she'd wear pants and shirts so that she couldn't, because she was tired of people glaring at her or whispering at her. So, that was, like I said, early 80s. But as you keep going and progressing on, and people want to learn, and they're inquisitive and they're curious. So where are you from, and what does that mean? And where's Pakistan? Like, we've never heard of this country before. It's where? Oh, it's between India and Iran. Oh, there's a country that exists there. And I mention that because after 9/11, and even now, when I share the story, people typically will laugh. They'll say, what do you mean they didn't know where Pakistan was? And what do you mean Southern California was not accepting of you? And again, I mention this because each city, each place has starts somewhere. There's a ground zero. And they're probably on a trajectory that's going in a much speedier, faster place than Louisville, but they have evolved. It's a beautiful melting pot. There's diverse communities, much more accepting. It's a beautiful place to live.
Right.
But I will share that my brother was working on his residency here at U of L Medical, and came out to visit during spring break. I was teaching in Northern California. Came out to visit, and we fell in love with Louisville.
Okay.
It was a gem. It was Southern hospitality. It was people opening doors. It was like people talking to my son in the grocery store and saying, hey, how are you, buddy? And frankly, we didn't have that in California. It was traffic. It was a rat race. It was get to work, come back to work, and get to sleep. And it was a struggle in that manner. So life was a little slower, a little nicer, it was prettier, 4 seasons. It wasn't just rain and sunshine. I remember there was a hill that I used to drive by to work in Northern California, and for 6 months of the year it was green, and 6 months of the year it was brown. That was the only 2 colors I saw. But then coming to Louisville, I saw oranges and yellows and pinks and whites, and it was just eye-opening.
Right. I want to take you. I want to go back to something we talked
Sure.
about before. You were talking about some of the challenges that your family faced. Did you have any individual challenges, maybe as a child growing up in California because of your heritage?
So yes, twofold actually, and I'll tell you, it's and this has actually guided a lot of the work and the mentality I have now and the work I do now as director for the Office for Globalization. One is I did have kids that picked on me. Why do you look this way? Where are you from? Why does your mom look like that? And I'm eating a hamburger. Am I eating your God? And I was Muslim. I grew up Muslim, and we ate beef. So it was like, you're not understanding where I'm from. You're not understanding my culture, and why can't you wear a skirt? Why don't you wear shorts? And why are you wearing loose clothing? So it was always questions, and I was getting picked on, and I was name calling with my last name, and because it was unique and it was different, or my first name. So a lot of that, but kids are mean. Kids are mean, and they will take advantage of what they can, where they can. But
It's just not relegated to California either.
no,
It's all over.
exactly. And it's not just me growing up in whatever 20 years ago. It's now too. We
Right.
see, kids are kids. They're growing, they're learning, and they can be mean. And so there was a little bit of that. But as I grew up as a teenager and as an adult, I didn't experience much of that. It was, like I said, it was a lot more educational learning opportunities and inquisitive questions, which I was happy to explore and talk about. So the flip side of that is what I mentioned, that second fold, is the fight between tradition and culture. So
Tell me
growing
about
up as
that.
an American, but living as a Pakistani is a very fine line. So I would leave the home, but I was American. As soon as I got back into the house, I was Pakistani. And it was a struggle. What culture am I? What team do I belong to? Do I belong to Team America? Do I belong to Team Pakistan? Do I, where are my roots? It's in Pakistan, but I'm not living there. So is it really soaked in me? This was a constant struggle growing up as a teenager. I was fortunate. I did have a mentor around my teenage years, probably when I was 16, 17, who explained to me that, the great thing is you don't have to choose. You can be Team Sabine. And Team Sabine can be 70% of this, 30% of that, 60, 20, whatever, 20 of something else. So you make you and who you are. But, my family, my parents were very, very traditional, Pakistani, Muslim, and, they didn't believe you could talk to boys. They didn't believe that you should be going over to your friends' houses. I wasn't allowed to go to the mall. I wasn't allowed to go to see movies. I wasn't allowed to have friends that were anything but female. So that was difficult for me to understand. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But that was the culture they grew up in. And it was a constant struggle of, I want to be able to please my parents and listen to my parents, but I know that I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to make friends.
Right.
And so that is what I mean about that struggle.
I'm glad you're telling me this because I have a very good friend that's Pakistani that actually lives in Chicago, and we talk occasionally, and she's never really told me that story. I get a sense of it, but it's good to hear your side and be able to understand a little bit better how you were raised and some of the values that you have based upon that. You matriculated to Cal State Long Beach.
Yep. I went to Cal State
What'd you
Long
study
Beach.
there?
So I studied liberal studies. I was pre-med for a little bit, but so this, you'll find this interesting too. I had gotten a full ride scholarship to UC Riverside for pre-med, was gonna go, but UC Riverside's about 3 hours driving with traffic and all of that from my house in Irvine. My father says, well, how are you gonna get to class? And I said, well, Dad, I have to go to dorms. And he goes, no, my daughter doesn't leave the house. She's not, if you can get into medical school 3 hours away, then you can get into UC Irvine. And I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. I already got in. And he's like, no, you're not going. So I gave a full ride, pre-med up, and then went to Cal State Long Beach and was like, that's all right. I still love science, and I want to teach. I volunteered all the time in schools with my baby sister's schools and her classrooms. So I was like, okay, this could be a great route. So I went through liberal studies, got a liberal studies bachelor's, minored in religious studies because that was very interesting to me. And then after that, I went and I got a teaching certification. And then at U of L, I got a master's in leadership, educational leadership and administration.
Okay. I was going to talk to you about that. I know that you are formerly a JCPS teacher.
Yes.
I know you talked about coming to Louisville, falling in love with the city, and eventually moved here, obviously. Tell me about being a teacher for JCPS. How was that for you?
So full transparency, when I taught in Northern California, it was a little of a posh little city, Union City. We had this great grant from MAC, and I had these beautiful stations, science stations. I taught middle school math and science, and I had these beautiful math stations, and with MAC labs and everything, and different and diverse cultures and different languages. And when I came to JCPS, or when I came to Louisville, I taught at Westport Middle School. And
A little bit different from being out in California.
yes, yes. So it was a little bit of a culture shock, and not so much with kids, because kids are kids, right? And we talked about this regardless of what year it is and what country, city, wherever, kids are kids. It was a little bit of the way things were done in the school system and the way that we took the teaming piece of it and the hand-holding piece of it. And so that a little bit was different. But I loved the kids. The kids were great. And, people always pick on me about, why did you choose middle school? And I said, well, you have to be a special somebody to teach middle school. And middle school kids are, they're just still so impressionable. But they're on that brink of so much and have so much potential, and they can go either way. And that is what I love, is that potential of them going in the way and discovering their potential and their possibility and leading them to where they can go. And it was always just about respect. Kids just want to be respected.
Right. That's a hard age. It's a real hard age for kids.
Yeah.
We talked earlier. I have 3 kids of my own, and I remember when they were going through that phase. It was that phase of trying to find out who they were. Now, I understand they're still trying to find this out now as they are older. But I always thought that the middle school ages were difficult because of not only the kids, but how they are trying to find out who they are or who they want to be.
Right.
So you make a transition from JCPS.
Yeah, so even within JCPS, I did multiple transitions, right?
I was
So
going to talk to you about that, but go ahead, please.
yeah, so out of the classroom, was in the district level, helping write curriculum, math and science curriculum with professional development, working with math and science teachers. We had a phenomenal grant with the GE Foundation on math and science standards, worked on that, and then was an assistant principal for a little bit, and then had an opportunity to go to Berea College and work. And this was really interesting because some of the work I was doing as a project manager for the GE Foundation grant at JCPS was a lot of community outreach. And with Berea College, it was community outreach and philanthropy in Appalachia, Kentucky, and it was providing them with high-level curriculum in Appalachia, Kentucky. So it was kind of building all those skills that I loved and all the experiences I had in one. And Berea is such a gem of a place, and it was great work. Unfortunately, my son had just started middle school, and it was very far away, and so I was there for a little less than a year. But it was a great experience regardless.
But now you're in the mayor's office.
Yes.
Tell us how you got there, because it sounds like it's a transition to go from JCPS. I understand you were at UPS at one time.
Yeah.
So how did you actually get into the position that you're in right now?
So from JCPS, I went to Berea College, and as I mentioned, I left Berea College and didn't really have a job lined up in Louisville. And then my fiance says, "Hey, you've always wanted to do project management. Why don't you just come stay here? I can support you, get project management certified." It's like, okay, that sounds good. So while I'm working on that, my neighbor works for UPS, and we're joking around, and as you can see, I enjoy talking. But I was talking to the walls, and she goes, "You know what? Just go work for UPS. part-time, make some friends, you'll have somebody to talk to. So I did that, and I was working part-time for them, and just kind of in their truck yard. And in about 6 weeks, they were like, can you take the management test? Sure. So I took the management test, and then, quickly was promoted to supervisor. And again, the stars were aligned where I was fortunate enough. They had a position that just opened up for charitable giving and community outreach. UPS is an amazing corporate citizen here in Louisville, and they try to do as much as they possibly can with the dollars that are given to them. So I was responsible for that, and I was responsible for the monies that they were distributing to our 501c3s here in Louisville. And that was just an amazing opportunity. Again, community outreach, working with our nonprofits, speaking and working with the mayor and working with Mary Ellen Wiederwall and working with even some of our legislators at the state level, really trying to get policy pushed forward too, because UPS has a voice. They are a big boy at the table. And so it was capitalizing a little bit on that too. And so through that, I was able to build some great relationships with Mary Ellen, and then the position had opened up here with the globalization, and she had reached out, and I had another friend who said, this looks like it's really good for you. This might be right up your alley. And frankly, it really was, because it was just what I call a dream come true. It was everything I wanted to do as an immigrant in giving back to my immigrant communities and all of the lessons I had learned into giving them back.
So you get appointed by the mayor, and you come in guns a-blazing, and then all of a sudden,
yes,
pandemic.
Yes, 5 weeks even. I mean, January 21st, 2020 is when it was my first day.
Right.
5 weeks into it, and I'm still just, like you said.
Okay. I've had people on the show during the pandemic and people after we've kind of opened some things up. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that the pandemic is over, because it's not.
No.
But talk about your job, how it was pre-pandemic and how it is now, that we are trying to get back to how things should be.
Sure. So pre-pandemic, the 5 weeks that I was in it, was networking. It was going out to our community partners, assessing their needs, talking about what they needed, talking about where we're at with our refugee communities, where we're at with immigrant communities, a lot of surveying and a lot of meeting and trying to get, and talking about some initiatives that had started, prior to me with Brian Warren, who was the director previous to me, and trying to get a footing on that and getting those going. But I will tell you, when COVID hit, everything was on pause. All of those things were on pause, and it was response management. And it was things I didn't imagine I was going to be doing in this position, but I'm really, really glad we did. Before coming on here, I mentioned with crisis comes opportunity. And this was a crisis that brought some opportunity for globalization and for our immigrant refugee communities. And one I will say is this partnership that we have, the Public Health and Wellness Department. Any gaps that our immigrant refugee communities had seen or experienced, we're addressing those gaps head on. Any gaps in accessibility or equity, we're addressing those head on, because we're forced to, right? We were forced to through COVID. And my team and I, team of two, and I were translating everything and anything that we could get our hands on around CDC in over 26 languages, working with community volunteers to provide PSAs in different languages, going to their communities and talking to them in their own respective language, because they are trusted community ambassadors, and talking about COVID-19 testing, the importance of COVID-19 testing, and now vaccinations. And then my team and I were putting on COVID-19 testing events, in taking the testing to them in their community, trying to overcome those barriers of transportation and overcome barriers of trust or mistrust and overcome barriers of language, and helping them navigate the healthcare system. And again, doing that with COVID-19 vaccinations, which we're still doing. So we're still continuing to do that. But I believe our community partners, like Americana, for example, they've been really killing it, and they've been hitting it out of the ballpark where I feel like they're so self-reliant, they don't really need our assistance. They're just doing such great work. And it feels like it's become this great, well-oiled machine where they are getting folks in. In fact, I think last weekend was the first weekend where they had to turn folks away because we didn't have enough vaccinations. So that was like, that was, I think, 300, almost 300 vaccines that they had conducted. So it was good stuff. So we're still continuing that work, but also we're now looking at strategizing what comes up. We recently had some focus groups that were done and asked our community partners, our immigrant business owners, and some of our university students, and said, okay, where do you see globalization going now? We sit under economic development. We want to help businesses. We want to revitalize our city, but we also want to assist our immigrant communities, because this past year and a half was a little bit more social driven, social work driven than it was entrepreneurial driven. And so we did get a good reading on what that's going to look like. And so we're trying to strategize moving forward, create another strategic plan, get some more feedback, working on, again, where our immigrant business owners are going to be, helping them open back up safely and successfully, marketing, engaging with community. Immigrant integration is huge for us. We have a new immigration plan where there's a larger amount of refugees that will be coming in. So how can globalization support our refugee resettlement agencies with that? That means we're looking at housing. We're looking at workforce development. We're looking at education efforts. We're looking at transportation. We're looking at finding a way where they can get driver's licenses and ESL classes, and building all those bridges for the thousands of refugees that we're going to be seeing coming, and also helping them integrate into not just their community, but the host city community too. Right. And earlier I'd mentioned that growing up, it was a two-way street for me, where I did get teased at school, but I also had this struggle at home. And so I carry some of that with me now, and I believe strongly in this two-way street that not only do we need to help educate our immigrants and refugees on integrating into our city and into our country, but I strongly believe that we also need to educate our native-born and our Louisvillians on helping our immigrants and refugees integrate, and how do we coexist together, especially now.
Right. I would ask you a question like, what is a typical day? But it doesn't sound like there's anything like a typical day for you. So
no, there really
isn't. What do you do every day? What do you do?
There, between meetings, which I am trying to have more in-person meetings now, and getting up and about. Yeah, and up and about. But between meetings and trying to, again, gauge where our partners are at and what their needs are, and assess their needs, and see how globalization can best assist, and really formulating additional partnerships and alignments. There's tons of strategizing. We are a welcoming city. I don't know if you know this or not, but we are the second we're certified welcoming city through a Welcoming America network. Okay. It is now time for us to get recertified. And so my team and I are working on that as well. So there's a lot of evidence gathering, and there's a lot of documentation gathering, and a lot of planning.
What's one goal you have for your job right now?
Oh, wow. I was like, I could give you top 10 goals.
Okay, give me top 10. Give me top 5. Give me top 5. Some of the things on your strategic plan. What do you think? Top 5 things you want to do.
I will give you. I'll meet you halfway. I'll give you 3.
Okay.
So I want to be able to convene. That is a goal for us. That is convening all our community partners. In a space where they can all learn, do some data sharing, learn what each of them are doing, and then formulate next steps on what we all need to do. And that includes, again, workforce development. So Kentuckiana Works, JCPS, JCTC, and our refugee resettlement agencies, our housing assistance folks as well. So that's one thing I really would love to get off the ground. Second thing is I really would like to create a more robust communication system for our immigrants and refugees. We have a website, we have a newsletter, I send out emails, and we have Facebook, but at the same time, there's just so many different platforms, and there's so many different ways of mouth, and really capitalizing on our community ambassadors and those relationships that we have built. So creating that communication plan is another one. And then, probably finding a focus, a happy medium between entrepreneurship and that economic development piece and that human piece, that social work, and how we can create that and live together in that aspect.
Okay. Let's transition to something else.
Yeah.
Because I know what you're doing now, but I met you through another venue. You are actually the president of the Equity Through Sports.
Yes.
How do we call it? Equity Through Sports
Organization.
So
Yes.
so both of us are trying to do some things that way. Can you talk a little bit about the mission of ETS?
Sure. So the mission really is to create an awareness about racial justice, about discrimination, about the history of discrimination in sports, and using sports as that platform, looking at athletes, and really amplifying their voices. So having that discussion, and I'm giving a long-winded version of our mission, right? But it is truly about having conversations with athletes about those, and not just athletes, also the corporations, those businesses that employ these athletes, and coaches, and kiddos, and being able to talk to them as well about what's happening in our city, racism, discrimination, freedom of speech, criminal justice, and all of those pieces that come together.
With all the cities in the United States, all these issues are cropping up, obviously. Why do you think Louisville is the best place for something like this to start?
So there's two reasons. One is this is the home of Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali had these amazing principles, and a sports figure, a legend, and his principles, his core principles of respect and compassion are things that, and equity, that we also, Equity Through Sports, believe in, and we want to mimic a lot of those values in our work. So that's one reason. Second reason is, last year we saw a lot of unrest in our city, and we've started to have some major conversations around around protesting and racial discrimination, and some things that may be uncomfortable. But with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and everything that's going around in our country and around the world, Louisville felt like ground zero. This has been the epicenter of so much conversation, whether it was negative or whether it was positive, whether it's this place for healing and bringing folks together. It's ground zero. And this is a great place to start those conversations and start moving them and moving those pathways and creating journeys.
What's one thing you hope to accomplish through that?
If I could, I'd love to change some of those policies. Taking it up to DC, taking it up to legislators, taking it up to those that really need to make a change in our city and changing that system. And we can do that in amplifying the voices of those that we respect and see all the time, playing or on TV. Okay,
I'm going to transition to the last part of the show, rapid questions. I got 5 questions I want you to ask. Just the first thing that pops in your head. If you could live anywhere other than Louisville, where would you live?
Australia.
If you could meet anyone living or dead, who would it be?
Gandhi.
Why?
Because his values really have driven me in my values.
Okay. 3 adjectives that describe you.
Oh my goodness. Fun, compassionate, smart.
What is your biggest fear?
Failure.
And tell me why.
Because I strive for success. I always want to achieve. I always want to do better. I always want to learn.
Last question. It's not a one-word answer. It's who you are. How do you want to be remembered?
I would want to be remembered as someone who helped make a difference in our system, in the way that we see each other, in the way that we treat each other. And it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter what country you come from, it doesn't matter what sex you are, what sex you prefer, it doesn't matter whether you have, a disability or, a gift. We should all be treated the same with respect. And I hope that that message carries on.
Sabine, thank you very much. I appreciate talking to you. We haven't had a conversation outside of this, but I look forward to getting to know you a little bit better, working with you through ETS, and seeing how I can help you out with some of the initiatives that you have through the mayor's office.
Thank you.
So thank you for being here
No,
today.
thank you for having me. This has been wonderful. It's been fun.
Well, once again, we've come to another end of our show. I'd like to say thank you to all our listeners out there. This has been a year. It's been a year of unexpected things, but it's been a great year, and we look forward to other times in the future. And as I close, I'd like to close by saying, as always, it's not a matter of what you think. It's not a matter of what I say. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perspective. Thanks again.